All right. Here today with Dr. Barbara Ann Briggs, a writer, poet, journalist, philosopher, among other things. And I first became aware of you on matchmaker.fm, which is a online site that connects podcasters with guests. I know you're a podcaster as well. And then I looked at your website, which is barbaraannbriggs.com, and that'll be in the show notes, and read a little bit more about you, read about your poetry, read some of your poetry. And I know that you are in India now by way of London, but originally from New York. And your path that led you to India is covered in a lot of other podcasts, and we might get into it here. But I thought maybe we'd start off with poetry. What do you think about that?
That's wonderful. Yes, I'd love to share poetry with you. That'll be lovely.
With your poetry, I would describe as free verse. And
Yes.
how did you get started writing?
Well, I started writing when I was when I was 10 years old, actually. I started writing children's stories when I was in the sixth grade. I wrote stories, The Talking Flowers, The Day Santa Claus Lost His Beard, Clementine Ant. I wrote many children's stories when I was in the sixth grade. My teacher encouraged me to write. And I was also writing poetry as I was growing up, 13, 14, 15. I was writing poetry. I was quite an introverted child, and I spent time just reading books and writing poetry and writing stories. And that was the way I amused myself.
When you
So,
when you write
yeah.
when you write poetry, where do you how do you prepare to do it? Is it something that is just always present, or is it something you have like a chain of events that leads up to it?
No, no, I write poetry spontaneously, and I really only write when I'm inspired. I never force myself to write. I don't practice writing. Most of the poetry that I wrote after I started meditating, these poems just came fluidly out of the pen when I finished my meditation. I just pick up the pen and the poem would write itself. So it was, a result of going to those quieter levels of the mind, which are more creative and more in tune with our innate intelligence. Our inner voice becomes more manifest as a result of meditating. And I did find that the poems would come much more quickly and much more fully formed after I started meditating. So those were some of my favorite poems that I wrote at that time.
Do you think that poetry, especially, but maybe creativity in general, do you think it originates outside of a person, or it, do you think it's different than that?
No, I think poetry comes from a very deep level of our awareness. There are different layers of the mind. There's the layer of pure consciousness. Excuse me. There's the layer of pure consciousness. That's the simplest state of human awareness. It's a state of infinite silence. Most people don't really fathom that level unless they're practicing meditation. But after that, there's a fine feeling level. There's a level of very fine, subtle emotion. And then afterwards, there's the intellectual level, and then there's the mental level, and then there's the level of the senses. And then that's more and more expressed. And then there's the level of actual speech. So the finer levels of the mind are the level of feeling, and poetry usually emerges from the level of feeling, that fine level of emotion, which is very close to pure consciousness. And my poems definitely were coming as a result of experiencing pure consciousness during my meditation. Then, when I finished meditating, that feeling level was very lively. And then the poem would just come from the feeling level, from a very deep level of emotion. It would just come spontaneously. I just pick up the pen and then I just start writing, and then I'd read it and I say, oh, that's the poem. So it was there was nothing manipulative in it. There was nothing intellectualized about it. It came simply from that state of quiet, quiet, very subtle level of feeling. And that's how my poems come. They come from that level.
Do you have, like, just when you're out there in the world, walking around, do ideas come to you and then you have to either remember them for later, or do you write them down in the moment, just like a line, and then use that as a starting point, or it just puts itself together later?
No, I don't carry a notebook with me. Maybe I should. Excuse me. But I don't. And no, I don't think of a line or anything like that. It did happen at one point in a previous house where I lived. I did wake up at 4 o'clock one morning, and then I just picked up my pen and I think I wrote 10 poems between 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning. So that was just a big spurt of inspiration. And I don't usually wake up at that time, but at that morning I did. And many poems just came out of the pen. So I don't really, there's nothing pre-planned about the poem. I don't think of a particular word or anything, but sometimes I did live in the Himalayas for some time, and up in that very rarefied environment, very high in the mountains, I did feel more inspiration because of being very close to nature and being in a beautiful environment, and the vistas, the mountains, and the sky, and I get very inspired when I'm very close to nature. So, and also when I was living close to the Ganges River, I also felt that same inspiration. So it really depends where you live. Now I live in a city. I live in Dehradun, and there's quite a bit of traffic outside my house. So it's not really the ideal place to have that silent, quiet reverie that inspires you to write poetry. I haven't written poetry now for quite some time, actually. I don't try to write. If it doesn't come, I don't. I'm working on a book at the moment, and I write my blogs, and the blog sometimes comes out quite lyric, with quite a bit of lyricism, because that's innate in my nature. But I haven't written poetry for some time. I only write when it comes spontaneously, and it really flows by itself. I don't really try to write poetry. Poetry is something that comes spontaneously.
I find that the case also. I've been writing poetry for the last few years more than anything else. And I do have times where I feel more thoughtful, and usually that's later. So it's at night usually, but just walking around during the day, if I see something or think of something or hear a particular set of words put together a certain way, I'll write that down. And one of my ideas is that's the difference between writers and not writers, is everybody is open to be able to write poetry if they wanted to, but if you don't write it, then you don't have the evidence that that's what you did. So I try to take notes, and it's easier now than in the phone. Like you have a phone and you can put notes in it than carrying around a notebook. But there were times back in the day where I thought a lighted pen was great to have by the bed, because you'd wake up in the middle of the night and have some ideas, and you didn't want to turn the light on because that might ruin the space. But also, you wanted to get those ideas down before they went away. And I think that probably has some things to do with levels of consciousness. And I'm not big into meditation. I definitely like the idea of sitting somewhere quietly and thinking. But how did you get started into meditation? And yeah, we'll just start there. How'd you get started into meditating?
Well, I was a seeker even when I was a college student in New York. I was a philosophy student, and I was seeking the answers to some of the mystical questions about the purpose of life and what are we meant to achieve in our individual life, and is there something higher to be aspired for? I was reading the biographies of many great artists. I was also a dancing student as I was studying philosophy. And then after I finished my BA, I went to London to become a full-time dancing student for some time. I wanted to leave America, and so I auditioned for a dancing school in New York, and I was accepted. And I was studying music in the school, and my I was reading Uspensky, In Search of the Miraculous. And in that book, he described experiencing subtle levels of sound. And then I asked my percussion teacher, "Oh, do you have any idea how we can experience this level that Uspensky is speaking about?" And he said, "Oh, I think you should go to a lecture on transcendental meditation." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yes, I practice this, and I think you should go." So I went. I went to the lecture at Imperial College in London, and I was impressed by the scientific evidence, because actually there's so many scientific research studies that have been done on the transcendental meditation technique. And it's one of the most scientifically verified techniques in the world.
I did have written
So
down
I
here
actually, so
that
I
that
actually, yes,
go
go
ahead,
on.
go ahead. On your website, you have um, some stuff written there, obviously, but I wrote down the subtle sounds, hidden dimensions of your being, and I was wondering how you envisioned the different dimensions. So it's interesting the getting there through meditation, and that's how you started on the meditation, was kind of intuitively feeling there were different levels and wanting to figure out what they were.
Yes, well, that was mentioned in the book that I was reading. Uspensky was a disciple of Gurdjieff, and he was very much into the spiritualism. And I was just reading the book, and he spoke about different levels. At that time, I didn't know about the different levels of sound, but Maharshi Mahesh Yogi, my guru, has explained all the different levels of the mind. So we learn about this when we learn about meditation. But at that time, I just had an intuition about it because I'd been reading the book. I wanted to know more about it, and I asked my teacher, and he suggested I go to the lecture. I went to the lecture mainly because of I wanted to find. I was curious about it, and I didn't think it was a spiritual technique for the development of higher states of consciousness. I just wondered what he meant. And when I went, I was impressed by what the teacher said about the scientific evidence, mind body coordination, faster reaction time, more harmony, more synchrony between the right and left hemispheres of the brain, the holistic development of the brain, and all these types of things. So I just thought, oh, I'll become a much better dancer if I take this. So I just decided to learn it. And then on the third day, when they give out more knowledge about it, I found out it was a spiritual technique for the development of higher states of consciousness.
Then
So then I found out all about the levels of the mind and everything as I continued to go more deeply into the knowledge. Maharshi is one of the greatest scientists of consciousness that has ever lived. His picture is behind me. And he's described all the different levels of the mind and all the different higher states of consciousness that the human being is has the privilege of having the possibility to attain because of the structure of the human nervous system. So I learned all these things afterwards, but that's how I started to meditate. It was very innocent. I just went to the lecture. My music teacher suggested I go to it, and I started meditating for the scientific evidence. And then I found out it was much more than I had I had ever imagined. And I was happily surprised by that.
I've seen where you've explained meditation is like treading water on the surface, and transcendental meditation is more of diving down to the depths of the ocean of that. Is that still how you differentiate the difference between regular meditation and transcendental?
Well, I can't really speak about any other type of meditation because I've only been doing this meditation for most of my life. So I can't say for other types, but I know that this meditation, that description fits perfectly because normally the mind is habituated to only utilizing the surface active thinking's level of the mind. See, most psychologists say that most people only use 5 to 10% of their full mental potential. That means the mind is like an ocean. The surface of the ocean has many waves always bobbing up and down. But as you dive deeper and deeper, deeper to the depth of the ocean, there's more and more unboundedness, and there's more and more stillness. In the same way, the surface level of the mind is very active. Most people have more thoughts than they know what to do with. It's like having some static on the radio. You have the music playing, but there's static in the background. So when you start to meditate, what happens is you use a mantra which directs the attention inward. Normally, the attention is always directed outwards through the five senses. But when you start meditating, we need a vehicle which directs the attention in the inward direction. That vehicle is the mantra. And when we use the mantra, it allows the attention to go inward. And then because the natural tendency of everyone's mind is to move in the direction of more and more happiness, more and more fulfillment, more energy, more peace, more freedom from boundaries. So that's why. And we just turn the attention inward, and then poof, the dive happens spontaneously because the mind moves in the direction of more happiness, more freedom, more unboundedness, more energy. And the state of pure consciousness is a state of pure freedom. It's a state of Satchitananda, eternal consciousness of bliss. It's a state of peace. It's a state of inner happiness. So because of that, everyone's mind, the natural tendency of everyone's mind is to move in that direction. So all we have to do is take the correct angle, and the dive to the deeper levels of the mind happens spontaneously without any effort. There's no effort involved in the process. Absolutely, trying is prohibited. There's no trying, there's no effort. It happens very naturally, simply, and easily.
Hmm. When you do meditate, where are you where do you start meditating? And then when you're meditating, where do you feel like you are?
Well, I start meditating just by sitting in a chair or sitting on my mat and closing my eyes. Wherever I've been during the day, some of those thoughts come. It's not like you go into another trance. It's nothing like that. I start meditating, I close my eyes, I sit comfortably, and then I've been meditating for many, many years. So immediately my whole body starts to settle down, and my mind just begins to go inward, inward, inward. And then I go into a state of more deeper and deeper silence. And then if I'm not so tired, like, if I haven't had excuse me,
Mhm.
if I haven't had a very exhausting day, like running around a lot or something things I've had to do, because I do everything in my house, cooking, cleaning, writing, the gardening, this and that. So if I haven't had a very exhausting day and I sit down and meditate, then immediately my mind just settles down to a very quiet level. And then after that, anything could happen. I can't say because every meditation is unique. Every meditation is different because the meditation depends on the condition of the physiology at that time. And because our physiology is always changing, it depends on many external factors as well. So, if I had a cough or a cold, that can influence my meditation. Or if I couldn't sleep well the night before, or if I had a class I was attending online and I didn't get finished, until 10 o'clock at night, and then I might not be able to sleep so well. That'll also affect my meditation in the morning. So all these things have to be taken into consideration. But the longer you meditate, the longer you practice meditation regularly, the more habituated your whole system is. So that immediately when you sit to meditate, it immediately starts going into a meditative state. And whatever that is for you, it'll be different for everyone, but whatever that meditative state is for you, the whole body will immediately and the mind will immediately begin to go into that state. Simply by sitting quietly with your eyes closed, you'll begin to go into the meditative state.
When you're meditating, is it more of your thinking about different things, or do you also visualize things? Are you
It,
is
it
it like a
varies.
dream
It
or not?
varies. It's not like you're just thinking about this and that because you use the mantra. It's that you take it, the mind is going inward, but there's also an outward stroke because the body is releasing stresses at the same time. The mind is getting a very deep state of rest. It's going to an unbounded awareness, but at the same time the mind settles down. The body is releasing stresses in the physiology, and everyone's stresses are different. There may be some structural stress, there may be some chemical stress, but the physiology is being purified at the same time the mind is settling down. Because we know that whenever we feel sick or something, the first thing the doctor will recommend is have take a good rest. Take rest because the body will begin to heal and repair itself naturally if we rest. So when we meditate, we're getting an even deeper rest than we get to that than we get during deep sleep. And because of that, the body immediately starts to repair and heal itself of many different ailments. So the blood chemistry changes, the stresses related to hormones, that changes, the brain waves change, they become more harmonious and more synchronous. You know, the breathing pattern changes. Many things change in the body while we're meditating because there's a purification process. So I can just say that every meditation will be different. Sometimes there may be visualizations, sometimes there may not be visualizations, sometimes there may be more thoughts depending on more stress is being released. Sometimes it may be very, very silent, and you just feel like you are far away from everything in another world completely. So every meditation is different. You can't really predict, even for the same person, what the meditation will be from one day to another. It's always changing. And from one person to another it can be completely different, and you can't predict that either because everyone is at different stages of their evolution, and this is what it depends on: the stage of one's evolution and also the purity of one's life, because the purity of one's life also influences one's meditation. Also the diet, if one's eaten something that was very disagreeable, that would influence your meditation because there would be some digestive disorder. So many different things influence the meditation.
When you after you meditate and you have these poetry things that just flow out, what do you think makes that happen? Is it your mind that has been working on that poem subconsciously, or is it just being quiet
It's
and
not.
thinking
It's nothing.
connects things?
It's no. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's all right.
Sorry. It's nothing like that. My mind's been working on it or anything. It's sometimes I've had an experience, or let's say I've met someone that made a very deep impression on me. Like when I was writing my love poetry, I met someone who I felt a deep resonance with, and I felt some maybe I felt I loved this person, and then I was meditating, and then after the meditation I wrote a long poem, and it was just full of these feelings which were just emanating from my heart. And then I read it and it was like, oh, it's about that person. And they inspired that poem because I felt some feeling, a deep feeling in my heart. And many of my poems were coming when I was deeply in love with one person or another. There weren't very many people that I was deeply in love with, maybe two in my life. And both of those people inspired quite a few poems. And it was really like the poem was written to them. It wasn't really, but it was because of them that the poem came. And yeah, it came from a deep level of feeling. It came from the feeling level. It wasn't thought about at all. And afterwards, when I read the poem, I thought, oh, that's, yes, I know why I wrote that poem. It's because of that person. Something like that, yeah.
Then through meditation, what have you learned as far as what do you think the purpose of life is then? What insights do you have towards that?
Well, I have to tell you, most people don't think this way, but I feel the purpose of life is to gain enlightenment. I mean, my life is really dedicated to enlightenment. The only thing that's weighing in the same scale is that I have a huge desire in my life to share knowledge. I want to share as much knowledge as I possibly can. And if it wasn't that I had this huge desire to share my work, to share knowledge, to share my feelings about love, about life and everything about part of my happiness comes from giving out knowledge. And if I didn't have this huge urge to give out knowledge, I would spend my whole day just focusing on my spiritual life. There are many more things I could do to accelerate my spiritual life, like even my reading Sanskrit. I did learn Sanskrit in Varanasi, and Maharshi really recommends that we read Sanskrit. And I have so many books in Sanskrit. Not I read it only for the sound. I don't translate it. I don't read the translations. My guru Maharshi says the sound of Sanskrit is so purifying to the whole physiology, and also listening to the Sanskrit recitations by the Vedic pundits is also extremely evolutionary. And I could spend many hours doing that. And I'm going away tomorrow, actually. And I'm going to be on a retreat for a month. And I'm just going to be doing what I'm speaking about now. I'm listening to Vedic recitations and just doing very long meditations for a month. And this is very important for accelerating the growth to enlightenment. And enlightenment is, I do feel that is the purpose of human life. But I'm not putting all my attention on just doing the inward stroke of just doing long meditations. It's not. I'm focusing a lot of my life on sharing knowledge because this is also very important to me, and I gain a lot of fulfillment from doing it. So these are the two things that are part of my life. I do feel enlightenment is the priority, but the truth is you can't just say, "Oh, I will just retreat from life and just do meditation." Maharishi doesn't recommend that to just meditate all day or something. He recommends that we meditate and act. We meditate and act, and we do things that bring us happiness, and I'm doing what brings me happiness. I'm writing another book. I'm doing my YouTube channel. I'm sharing videos. Sharing my knowledge on my podcast. I've written many articles for magazines. I've had 41 articles published, and I do a lot of outside work, but it's all in the same direction. It's all spiritual knowledge. It's all related to spiritual awakening. So it's in the same direction of the orientation of my life. So I think that kind of explains what I feel the purpose of life is.
When you say enlightenment, does that mean just understanding spirituality, or do you think it, what do you mean when you say enlightenment?
No, it's not an intellectual thing. When I say enlightenment, I mean living in God consciousness. I mean living in divine awareness. I mean when you reach enlightenment, your life is totally in tune with the will of God, and you can actually Maharshi says shaking hands with God. I mean you can actually have that immediate that relationship with God in which you can converse with God. You see the divine, you see the divine illumination in everything that you look at. Every person that you behold them as an image of God's. You can see the inner being of everyone, and you can see the divine um, effervescence, the divine beauty of everything in creation. Everything in creation is made of divine light. And when all the stresses are purified from our system, we actually can see the divine light emanating from all the whole material universe. Everywhere we look, we see the divine light emanating from the trees, from the mountains, from the flowers, from the grass, everywhere. It's just an expression of God's grace and the divine immanence that pervades the whole universe. So it's another state of consciousness completely, because in the state of enlightenment, you have pure consciousness with you all the time, 24 hours a day. You're established in the state of eternal bliss 24 hours a day. You have no more stress in your physiology. All the stresses are permanently eliminated. And you live in a state of God consciousness. You live in a state in which you can converse with the divine. This is what I mean by enlightenment. And many of the great saints in every culture have spoken about their vision of God, their unity with God, their ability to see the divine in everything. You have this described in every culture. Saint Francis, Saint Julian of Norwich, Ramakrishna, Paramahansa Ramakrishna, Ramana Maharshi. So many great saints in every tradition have spoken about this level of life, and we can read it in their own words, in their biographies, and Saint Teresa of Avila, many great saints in every tradition.
What do you think the existence of God is? Do you think it's all of us together, like a collective conscience? Do you think it's something outside of that? When you say God, what do you think that is?
No, God is within us. I think God is that divine awareness that exists at the deepest level of everyone's awareness. God is not outside. God is immanent and eminent. God is all over. God pervades the whole universe. God is love. The deepest level of the universe, you could say, is a field of unbounded love. We don't contact that field. That's why we're not expressing unbounded love in our lives. We're expressing many other things, but not unbounded love, because we're not in contact with the deepest level of our own being. Some of the greatest saints have said that God is love. Love is another name for God. And where is God? God is that divine being, our own being. We can get in touch with that level when we transcend the surface active level of the mind and we experience the deepest level of our own awareness. It's a state of pure, unbounded awareness. Another term for it is pure being or pure consciousness or that divine level of life. You're aware of that expression, man is made in the image of God. So the individual is really cosmic. The individual has the ability to align individual intelligence with cosmic intelligence, but we're not doing it. We're not doing it because we are habituated to always directing our attention outwards through the five senses. So we've lost touch with that inner source of infinite bliss, that source of the divine deep within our own being. When we touch it within our own being and we enliven it within ourselves, then we begin to appreciate it in the material universe because the senses have to become refined. Actually, the vision changes when you become enlightened, and your vision becomes much more fine, and you're able to see the subtle emanations, the subtle vibrations of which every material object is made. And then you begin to appreciate what life is really all about. it's a garden of infinite beauty, but we don't see it because we have the wrong color glasses on. When you have red glasses on, everything looks red. But when you have yellow glasses on, everything looks yellow. And when you take the glasses off, perhaps you see the world as it really is without any glasses.
Do you think there's a reason that humanity is made in this image and some reason why our views are restricted so much?
Well, man is made in the image of God. That's the divine will. We are. God has created man, not just man, of course, but every individual in
Right.
the image of God. And it's the design of the divine will. It's the cosmic will that we are made in the image of God. This is how God designed the universe. And the reason for it is because our birthright is to attain unity with God. We're just coming back home. Enlightenment has been described as a state of coming back home. We come back to who we really are. We got lost in the scramblings of the universe. We got lost in the labyrinth of life. We got lost because we were running after all the material glamour in the relative world, even though it didn't bring us any happiness, because the relative world is always changing. One can't find lasting happiness in something that is constantly living, dying and dying and dying and changing and being recreated, recreated. The relative world is a world of undying change. And so, because we can't find permanence in that, we can't find permanent or lasting happiness in the outside world. We have to go in, but we forgot the direction. We forgot who we really are. We lost touch with who we really are. And now we're coming out of the cave and we're beginning to reassess our values. And we're beginning to realize that what we were looking for, we're looking for it in the wrong direction. And if we turn our gaze inward, and now the world is being transformed, we're in a transformative stage, and everything is being in a chaotic way, but this may give rise to a completely new value system that is more based on truth and based on the reality of life.
If enlightenment is the idea of coming back home, why do you think we left to begin with? I know you just said all these things of chasing materialism, but do you think that there was some sort of conscious decision on whatever our being is to separate ourselves somehow more individually from a cosmic will and leave home to then realize, no, we really want to be back there? Why did we leave?
Well, I can't say what the real reason was, but life is a journey, and life moves through cycles, rhythmic cycles. So there's a cycle of turning in, a cycle of turning out, a cycle of, just like there's light and darkness, light and darkness, light and darkness. There's the four seasons: spring, autumn, winter. Summer, spring, autumn, winter. So it's like everything moves in cycles. So maybe part of the individual life has to move through these different cycles, the cycle of dying and rebirth, rebirth to the truth, losing the truth, finding the truth. It's like an odyssey. It's a journey. Even the process is important. And even if we feel that sometimes we're going backwards, we're still moving forwards, because sometimes a boat has to move in the backward direction to avoid an iceberg, and then it moves forward again when the iceberg is gone. So the whole thing is a process, and we don't have to think that we lost it or anything, but we have to, it's a matter of setting our priorities in life, because whatever we put our attention on, that's what grows stronger in our lives. And if we keep putting our attention on only the outward material glorification, then we'll lose sight of what lies inward. And the treasure house of knowledge and bliss and creativity is really inside. But if we always look outside, we might just miss the boat. We'll take,
Mhm.
Mahashi says you can take a boat to enlightenment, you can take a paddle boat, or you can take an airplane. or you can take a train, or you can take many different ways of getting there. But some ways will take you to the goal much quicker. In other ways, you may be walking to the goal, walking through how many miles of desert before you actually even reach close to the goal. So it just depends what you choose in your life, what choices you make, and how you prioritize what you want to do, and what is meaningful to you.
I think I've found after some time thinking about it, and I think poetry helped that, and writing helps that too, to get your ideas out there so you can see them and maybe rearrange them or see that they're already arranged a certain way. If we are part of a group consciousness, like a cosmic will or a cosmic mind, that perhaps the reason we're broken into these little segmented pieces of individuality is to obtain some sort of perspective. And that if we were all one, then in the end, you're all back together, or at some time you're back together. And then you have gained all of these different things of how this individual treated this individual or this situation. And it's extended over all the people that have ever existed, of experiencing those different perspectives, that if you were all knowing and all powerful, maybe you could understand those perspectives, but maybe you couldn't, because you have such a limit on what you can know, that the human is so limited, that this is that little piece of how they feel about this thing. And maybe that's the reason of life, is experience. And then through that, you get the enlightenment of everything else. You're adding to the recipe of that cosmic will. But
Well,
I don't know for sure.
yeah. Well, first of all, there's no separation at all. There's no separation between anyone or anything in the universe. Everything in the universe is interconnected, interdependent. It's an interwoven web of life. So the illusion that we're separated, or that anything that we do can ever be separated from anybody else's action in the universe, or that it won't influence the entire universe, is a complete illusion, because everything we do, every thought we have, goes out into the whole universe as a vibration. It vibrates into the whole universe. Even if someone says a strong word or a harsh word to someone in a room with a closed door, this affects the whole universe. And this actually adds to the conflicts on the international level in the world. So people don't realize that everything is interconnected, completely interconnected in the universe. The individual consciousness is always creating and influencing the collective consciousness in the world. So what we do as individuals has a great effect on the entire universe. And Maharshi has an expression: the universe reacts to individual action. So, and Maharshi says that it's so important for us to be happy, and that we can do more for the world just by being happy than we realize. Because by being happy and by promoting positivity and expressing, radiating joy and compassion, empathy, sincerity, integrity, kindness into the universe, you're counterbalancing all the violence and all the anxiety and all the anger that's being expressed in the universe. So we need to counterbalance that. And even our conversation now is helping the universe, because it's two people trying to find a resonance in our thought patterns and trying to understand each other from two completely divergent places in the world. So it's a way of realigning our awareness so that we can begin to understand each other. So I think that's what we don't really realize in the world, that we are so interconnected, And that illusion that we're not, and that we can do whatever we want in our part of the world, and it won't affect the other part of the world, or we can do whatever we want in our corner of the universe, and it won't affect the entire universe, or we can say whatever we want to our friend and just reject someone out of, without any reason, and start yelling at them and making them feel really hurting their feelings. Well, you might think it was just hurting that person's feelings, but actually it's hurting the feelings of the universe. It's actually hurting the fabric of the universe. And that hurt that someone expresses towards, this harshness that someone expresses towards someone else, the law of the cosmic law is that whatever you send back comes back to you. So as we sow, so shall we reap. So if someone does something really awful and cruel to someone else, they're inviting cruelty into their own life. So I don't know why I studied this law of karma when I was a teenager. When I was in, about 18 years old, I went into I was part of a society that studied comparative religion and philosophy. And I read about the law of karma, and action and reaction, basically. And immediately I thought, this is true. This is completely true. This is correct. But then I went and spoke to my mother about it. She said, how do you know it's correct? I said, I just.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was just something I recognized the truth when I read about it. And I don't know, some people don't really understand it, or they don't accept it, but it does make sense, and it is a cosmic law. As we sow, so shall we reap. And if more people understood that, and they understood how important it is to radiate positivity and radiate happiness and helpfulness and kindness, then perhaps the universe wouldn't be in the present state of affairs.
Yeah. Philosophy is an interesting thing to study, especially if you're looking at it as maybe if you were younger and you were religious and then you found philosophy, it probably changed your idea of religion. At least that's how it worked for me and some other people I've talked about it with. But how do you manage and protect your creativity and views for yourself? Like if you're a teacher and you're
Well,
talking to other people, how do you help them find the way?
well, I live a very introverted life. I really, I live a very inward life. I'm not teaching at the moment. I'm just focusing on my writing and my expressions online, my YouTube channel and my podcast. And I'm writing I still write articles, and I'm working on my third book. So I live a very inward type of life. I don't socialize a lot. In fact, I just socialize with the vegetable man. I go out to get my shopping done.
Hmm.
And, I live in a house with a few other, I live upstairs. The landlord lives downstairs with her son. So, yeah, I find no difficulty sharing my views. I share my views online. I share my views in my writings, and I share my views if I happen to be teaching a course in TM, which I haven't done for quite some time because I'm focusing on other things. So I don't have any conflict with my views or the views of other people. I've always followed my inner voice in my life. I've never been one of the crowd. I've never adopted the ideologies of the crowd. I've never followed the inclinations of other people because I felt I should. I've always followed my own inner voice in my entire life. And because of that, I'm very self-referral. I'm not object referral. I don't refer outside myself in terms of what I should believe. I've always held my own beliefs. I formulated my own beliefs. I formulate my own ideologies, different from what my family thinks. They hardly ever communicate with me.
Hmm.
because I live a completely different life. They've never called me in 20 years.
Goodness.
So they're in America and they have a very business oriented life. And my life is totally different. So they recognize that I'm a teacher of meditation and I've been on this path for most of my life. But they don't communicate with me about it. And you know, they don't really understand too deeply what I'm doing, I don't think. Or maybe I have no idea what they think actually. So yeah, I've lived away from my family for most of my life. And no, I have no conflict because I'm happy with doing my own work and I'm happy with the life that I'm living. It allows me to do what I need to do without any interruptions. So I'm quite pleased with what I'm doing, and I'm very happy to be in India because in India the orientation is spiritual. It is a spiritual country, and the orientation is for enlightenment, even though most people do not follow this anymore. But the ancient tradition of India was formulated on the basis of enlightened sages and enlightened seers who were established in the highest state of consciousness. And this is the Vedic literature, which encapsulates their knowledge. So I came to India for spiritual reasons because I wanted to live my spiritual life here. And India has allowed me to do that because I don't have any 9 to 5 job. I live on a small allowance, which allows me to take care of my needs. And I'm not searching for material opulence. And I'm satisfied with my life as it is. It's a very simple life. Most people wouldn't choose this type of life, but for me, it's fine.
How did you start podcasting then?
Someone I lived with suggested I do it. One of my landlords, I've moved quite a few times, and my landlord, who is a certified accountant, and she said, Barbara, why don't you just go online and give a lecture online? She encouraged me to do it, and then I just did one, and I showed it to them, and they said, "Oh, this is great! You must do this. You must give these lectures online." That's how I started the podcast. I just lived with a landlord who told me I should do it, and then recently I went to Kerala. Well, I just started my YouTube channel, I think, last year or this year. I don't remember. No, I started it some time ago, but then I stopped it. And then I went to Kerala recently. I was at a spa clinic for a panchakarma treatment. And then afterwards, one of the doctors, he said, whatever you do, Barbara, you must not stop your videos. You must not stop making videos. And I was so surprised. I didn't even know he'd seen any of my videos. And I said, really? He said, whatever you do, wherever you go, you must continue the videos. So I said, oh yes, sure, I'll be happy to. So I was so I was so happy when he said that because he was a very highly respected doctor. And I thought, my goodness, he likes my video. And I'm so happy. So yeah, it started spontaneously. It wasn't a long thought out process. Now I'm trying to continue my videos. It's quite a lot of work. 2 videos every week, then 2 podcasts, different episodes every month. And, I've made about 80 videos already, and I have made 40 podcasts. And yeah, it's quite time consuming because I'm trying to finish my third book at the same time. So yeah, that's my life.
I know all the information for that's on your website. What's the name of your podcast and your YouTube channel?
The name of my podcast is Essence of Life, Essence of Life, .buzzsprout.com. And
And
it's
then
on
your
all the podcast websites, Apple, all of them. It's on all the podcasts. It's on yeah, all of the podcast websites. You'll find my website, my podcast there.
and your YouTube channel.
My
Does that have a
YouTube
different name?
channel is Living Wisdom. Living wisdom is one word. Living is capital and wisdom is capital. I put them as one word and dash Barbara Briggs.
Okay.
And on my Living Wisdom I podcast, I mean YouTube. Yeah, I have about 80 videos and I need more
Okay.
subscribers. I've had quite a few views, 3,600 views, I think, but I only have More subscribers would be most welcome.
Okay. I'll make sure I put those addresses in the show notes for anybody that
Okay,
wants to see
great.
them.
Thanks.
And also,
Yeah.
they can also find all that information at your website, again, barbaraannbriggs.com. What is
Yes, that's
your
right.
the book you're working on? What's that about, and when do you think you're going to be finished with it?
I really hope it's three-quarters done. The book I'm working on is The Secret of Creative Abundance, Alignment with Our Spiritual Nature.
Okay.
The Secret of Creative Abundance, Alignment with Our Spiritual Nature. And this book will go into the source of creativity and the expressions from the both the expression from the scientific point of view and the artistic point of view, and the and my own point of view as an artist and a poet, basically. So that book will be very different from my previous book, Pilgrimage on the Path of Love. Pilgrimage on the Path of Love is a very lyrical book, and it expresses my deep love for India. And it's a story, it's a um, novel, it's a novel of visionary fiction. And it talks about the spiritual transformation of a woman's life through her love for India and her love for someone in the book. So yeah, that my novel I would love people to read. This is it's a very different book from my first book was on Mahashi's teachings, and my second book is a novel. And my third book is more an intellectual understanding of creativity. But it's much more than that. But anyway, yeah.
Okay. And all of that information is on your website. Again, that'll be in the show notes. I appreciate you taking the time to talk today. Very interesting stuff to think about. And I will be visiting your website, and I'll sign up for your YouTube channel too, and get you more
Oh,
subscribers on that.
thank you.
But thank you very much for being here.
Okay, it's been my pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation.
All right. I'll talk to you in a minute after this. Okay.
Okay, fine.